Jayne, thank you so much for joining us today. For those who may not know you, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey?
Yeah, okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm myself, and I went to medical school to St Mary's Hospital in London in 1978. I qualified as a doctor, and I learnt when I was at medical school many things, but I also learnt that everybody used to die from these terrible scourges of diseases, and then vaccines came along and they all stopped dying. There were some other terrible diseases for which there were no vaccines, but we stopped dying from those, we were told, because of better social conditions, clean water, ventilated housing, proper sewage disposal. And you might think that being quite clever, because medical students are supposed to be quite clever, that we might have asked, well, if these things, all these social condition improvements, stop people dying from these diseases, how do we know they didn't stop dying from those other ones for that reason as well? But at medical school, there's so much of an overload of information that we just learned that these are the vaccine preventable ones, and these are the social condition preventable ones, and that was it. And so I went through medical school, I qualified, I then trained in orthopaedics and trauma, and then I decided to become a GP, so I did paediatrics and obstetrics and gynecology and ear, nose and throat and skin and eyes and whatever, geriatrics, as we used to call it then. We have to call it medicine for the elderly now. And when I was doing community paediatrics, I used to often counsel the people who didn't want to have the whooping cough vaccine, because now the big vaccine controversy is the MMR vaccine, which is soon to be the MMR plus chickenpox vaccine.
Yeah.
And I would say to them that, well, basically, I wasn't the sort of person who would say, well, these are safe and effective 100% and these ones, and you'll die from the disease. I would say that we're told that there are adverse effects you can have with a vaccine, but there are also adverse effects you can have with a disease. And we're told that it's likely that it's 10 times more likely that you will have a bad outcome from having the disease than having the vaccine. So any sensible, responsible parent would vaccinate.
Okay.
And it's interesting that I came through thinking things like that, and also that I had such a fear, because doctors do have a fear about these diseases. And so part of the dogmatism we have, apart from targets of getting a certain percentage of people vaccinated, in terms of trying to push patients to have vaccines, is also because we're scared. We think you're trying to kill your child, in essence. And I don't know why this is. It's something that happens at medical school, because my background was that when I was a child, my parents would send me to mumps, measles, chickenpox and rubella parties deliberately to get those things in the holidays so I wouldn't miss school.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a form of child abuse, because the whole point of getting any of these illnesses is that you miss school.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And somehow, with that being my norm, I went through medical school and came out being so terrified of these diseases that I thought that when my children were born in 91 and 93, that they should have these vaccines, otherwise they would essentially die. Yeah. So this is part of the programming of doctors, and I don't know, it sort of came upon me imperceptibly. I didn't notice that it happened.
Okay.
And I not only thought that, but we used to think that basically if you didn't vaccinate your children, you were ignorant.
Yeah,
and if you couldn't claim the excuse of ignorant, then you were sociopathic.
Okay.
Because why would you otherwise withhold this, what we saw as a life-saving intervention, and put all these other children at risk when we talk about herd immunity?
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And then when my children were born, as I said, in 91 and 93, and I wouldn't say unthinkingly, I would say with superior knowledge of forethought, had them vaccinated with everything that was available, which those vaccines were far fewer than what we have now. And they also had a first dose of MMR.
Okay.
And then what happened? Well, in 1994, I suppose to backtrack a bit, I've always been interested in all sorts of things, and I also am interested in things that I don't necessarily agree with. Okay. And at one point when I was in working doing obstetrics and gynecology, neonatal intensive care, I was working with someone who trained at the Faculty of Homeopathy. In her house years, we used to do 6 months medicine, 6 months surgery, and she did it at the Faculty of Homeopathy. And apart from the fact she'd done that, she seemed otherwise normal. As opposed to these weird people who do these strange, unscientific things. And she arranged a conference one weekend for a day where you could go along and learn about homeopathy. So I went along there to poo-poo it, basically.
Okay.
And I paid my £10, and then we got a little packet of remedies, a few remedies. And one of the things that somebody said there, which struck me as interesting, although I thought the whole lot was probably hocus pocus, but I'd gone there because I like to see what other people do, even if I think it's... well,
That's
it's-
good though to
yeah,
see.
Yeah,
you
but
know,
also...
yeah.
You
were
can
you
also,
going with the kind of critical?
well, you can go there thinking, oh, well, they're wrong about this, and they're
Yeah,
wrong
yeah,
about
yeah.
that, and
Well,
they're
I
wrong
can
about
prove
the
them
other.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he said that he'd had an uncle who'd had such terrible stomach problems. He'd had most of his stomach and guts cut out over the period of 50 years, and he'd given him one single remedy, and that had taken away all his symptoms. I won't say cured, I'll say
Okay.
all his symptoms after that stopped. And I
Right.
thought, well, this is a bit weird, and I should buy this little book. There was a little book you could buy for £10.
Mhm.
They looked like a Bible. It had a leather bound on the outside, onion skin thin paper, and a sort of a red bit along the edges. So I bought that, and I read a bit about it, and I thought, well, this is sort of quite interesting. And because I'd read about that, I started looking at some other things, including things to do with people who didn't think vaccines were a very good idea, because some homeopaths don't think they're a good idea.
Yeah.
Right.
And I started reading them. And I started reading them and thinking, well, you're wrong about this. But then sometimes they'd have references to scientific journals that were peer-reviewed, or they'd have graphs which would show disease or death incidences. And I think, well, they can't be right.
Mhm.
And then I'd look them up and they were. So I'd had a little bit of a seed of something in my mind. And I'd actually counselled enough parents who didn't want to vaccinate their children that was my mindset. But I realised there was this sort of undercurrent of people who were undoing all our good work by trying to stop people vaccinating.
Right.
And so when in 1994 we got the letter from the chief medical officer to all the pharmacists and nurses and doctors saying there was going to be a measles epidemic, they never said what science it was based on, or we just assumed it was going to come from America or something. It turned out in later years it was based on computer models, and we know all about those since
Yeah.
COVID. But anyway, so we thought there was this epidemic coming. And they were saying everyone who's had one measles-containing vaccine will not necessarily be protected. And that's fine. No, nothing's 100%. And in those days, there was only one measles shot in the schedule, because
Okay.
it was when it was introduced in 1968 in this country, they said one shot for life. It's just like having the real disease. It's just
Okay.
like natural immunity.
Right.
And so I thought, well, that's okay. Nothing's 100%. But then they said, even if you'd had 2 shots of the one-shot vaccine, and you might think, well, how did that happen? Well, in 1988, the MMR, measles, mumps, rubella one came in, and they said to us, well, even if they've already had a measles vaccine, you should give them the MMR anyway, because it will boost their measles immunity and protect them from mumps and rubella.
Right.
So now they were saying 2 shots of the one-shot vaccine, and you could still get the disease. And I'm thinking, well, this doesn't seem like such a good trade-off. And I'd been saying to the people about the whooping cough vaccine, well, essentially having the vaccine is supposed to protect you from whooping cough,
Yeah.
and that is much safer than having whooping cough. But now you're saying you could have, say, like the whooping cough vaccine. I mean, if the MMR vaccine, if the measles vaccine is not working, you could have the whooping cough vaccine or the whooping cough containing vaccine, and you could have the disease. Well, now you've got the risk of the vaccine and the risk of the disease.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when it comes to adverse reactions, no one can tell you of the vaccine, can tell you really what the reactions are. Not me, not the Department of Health, not the Food and Drug Administration. No one knows, because since we've had mass vaccination from the early 60s, no one has had a proper open method of recording the adverse reactions. And when I say open, I mean where you're not penalised or stigmatised, or you don't even know about the fact that there's something that you could register an adverse reaction on, because you're told that all the vaccines are safe and effective, and anyone who complains is just making it up.
Yeah.
Or, you know, in every city in England, there's someone who has some apneic, when you stop breathing, drop attack. And if it just happened to happen after a vaccine, you think it's the vaccine, but it could have happened anyway. So we don't know what the
Yeah, this
adverse
is
reactions are of the vaccines. We have a slightly better idea of what happens when you manage the illnesses, but that's often due to mismanagement of the illness. And so I was thinking, well, now this ratio I've been showing people is not so good. And what's happening about this measles vaccine? And so they're saying now you need a 3rd shot of the one-shot vaccine. Now we have 2 in the schedule.
Right.
But we know even that doesn't stop people getting these things, particularly the mumps component. We have outbreaks of mumps in universities. There was one American army ship that sailed around the Gulf for about 4 months because everyone kept on getting mumps. and none of the Gulf states would let them land, and they had to helicopter in food supplies. And they were saying a strange viral illness that is very much like mumps. And in the end, they were just saying it is mumps. And these are in army recruits who have had at least 2, but probably 3 MMR vaccines, So we're just chasing after our tails with these things.
So how is that justified in terms of, you have a vaccine so you don't catch the illness? What's the what do they say?
Well, it's all in the words.
Yeah.
It used to say immune. It will make you immune.
Okay.
But we don't say immune anymore. Have you noticed?
Okay.
We say protects.
Okay.
I've not noticed
Oh,
that.
okay.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
Yes, you have to look out for the words. There's all these
Sure.
weasel words.
Okay.
So when was the biggest eye-opening? Was it with this when you
so
realised about
that's
it?
so then the other thing they said was, anyway, the best way of eradicating a disease is to interrupt the chain of transmission,
Okay.
i.e. vaccinate en masse. And then I thought, so why are we vaccinating all these 2 and 3 and 4-month-old babies or 1-year-old babies with MMR? It's 12 to 15 months. Why don't we just wait 2 or 3 years, and every 2 or 3 years just vaccinate everybody, if that's the best way to break the chain of transmission?
Right.
And that's what started me looking into it. And so the first thing I thought I'd do is, having read some what you could vaguely call anti-vaccine literature, and then being surprised that there was actually some science behind it, I thought, I went to a top London medical school, St Mary's Hospital. Incidentally, Andrew Wakefield was 2 years above me there, so I don't know if there's something in the water or whatever. And I've had all the top London professors and all the top London textbooks.
Yeah.
I've read these books, and they're either from people who aren't doctors, heaven forbid, or they're doctors from America, and what do they know, I thought, I've got to find out for myself, not just for myself and my children, and also for my patients, because these are the people I've been counselling. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go and get these figures myself, because what they'd shown me was that people didn't stop dying when the vaccines came in. They'd already started doing that. In terms of something like whooping cough, 99% of the people who used to die had stopped dying not only before there was a whooping cough vaccination, but before we even had antibiotics.
Okay.
And with measles, it was 95 to 99%. So this was just not true. And certainly the graphs that we looked at, they did show a drop, usually in incidence, not in death. And I don't know about you, but myself and most of the people that want to know about vaccination, they're not so worried about nursing people. What they don't want is death or disability. And death is the biggest form of disability, because when you're dead, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
And usually, whatever the death rates are, the disability rates are coming down also behind, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'll ring up the Office for National Statistics, who are not far away from here. They're in Pimlico.
Right.
And I rang them up and I said, could you give me the graphs of the deaths for all the things against which we vaccinate since we've been collecting records? And they said, well, we can do that for smallpox and tuberculosis, but we don't have them for the other ones. And I said, oh. They said, try the Department of Health. Because they said they'd got them from the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I know, I've got them. They're in the Green Book. Now, if anybody wants to know what their doctor might know about vaccination, if he's read it or she's read it, you put Green Book vaccine into your search engine and it comes up with the Immunisation Against Infectious Diseases Handbook,
Right.
which in hard copy used to be green, and green is a lot shorter than saying that. And you can see all the graphs. I said, I know, I've got the Green Book. I want to know from before that. So as I said, they said, ring up the Department of Health, which I did. And they said the same thing apart from opposite. Ask the Office for National Statistics. So I rang them back again. I said, look, you must have the data. And they said, oh, yeah, we have the data. It's here on the shelves. Because they started collecting in 1837.
Right.
They said, you can come in. So I said, okay. So I went in with my, by then, probably 6 and 4-year-old daughters. And I must admit, when I was going there on the tube with, packages of sandwiches and colouring books and things like that and bottles of drinks, I was thinking, they have all these people doing PhDs and MSCs and BSCs working in all sorts of medically public funded disciplines. Why am I going in with my children to get these books off the shelves, to get to make the graphs? So I did wonder. And I went there. They were terribly nice. They let us sit on a table and they gave us jugs of squash. And I pulled out all the mothy books from 1837 until 1999. And then after that, you could buy a very expensive user-unfriendly CD-ROM, which is now also available free, not the CD-ROM, but the information. It's still very difficult to access, but it's free now on the internet. But at least I could take that home and fight with it at home, not having my children in a national reference library. Yeah. So anyway, so I took all these things and I made the graphs, and the graphs showed the same thing. So the graphs are on my website. There is my book called Vaccinatable Diseases, and their vaccines. So they're all in there. And they mirrored all these graphs that I'd seen from people who weren't doctors or people in America. And you probably know Dissolving Illusions by Dr. Suzanne Humphreys and Roman Bystrianic.
No.
No, it's a fabulous book. Okay, so they've got their own graphs in there from America. It's just had its 10th anniversary, and they've republished the edition with a lot of extra things. It's opened a lot of people's eyes to.
Well, I often get a lot of messages actually for people asking just where they can find information. So that's great.
Yeah, Dissolving Illusions is a very accessible book. Okay, and not only is it accessible and wonderful, you can get the cheaper version, which is the one from 10 years ago. You can get the expanded version, which is the 10th anniversary when it says 10th anniversary on it. But there's an extra book, a source book, which as a person who's really interested in sources and has all these mothy books from, the 1900s or whatever, it's got references that you won't get anywhere, references that they've got and they've printed from what doctors used to say, archives, proceedings from tribunals and whatever. It's a really good source book if you really want to do a deep dive into it. So it's excellent.
Thank you. Just a quick pause to talk about something we don't speak about enough, hormones.
Because for most of us, it's not that our bodies are broken, it's that our hormones can fluctuate. And when that happens, everything feels harder. From sleep, energy, mood, digestion, all of it.
That's exactly why we both use Happy Mammoth. It's one of the few wellness brands we truly trust when it comes to hormone health. Everything they make is evidence-based and designed specifically for women's bodies.
I've been taking Estro Control, which helps to support healthy estrogen metabolism and bring your cycle back into balance. I honestly can't believe the difference, and it's the first time I felt more comfortable and balanced during my cycle in years. No mood swings, no bloating, no heaviness. It just felt normal, which is huge.
And I take Hormone Harmony, which helps to support healthy cortisol levels, steady energy and overall well-being. It's helped me feel more rested, focused and emotionally steady throughout the month.
What we both love about Happy Mammoth is that they're not trying to fix you. They're helping your body work the way it's meant to.
It's been such a game changer for both of us. If your hormones have been feeling all over the place, then this is your sign to start supporting them properly.
You can find both Estro Control and Hormone Harmony at happymammoth.com, and you'll get 15% off your first order with the code RAISE at checkout.
Anyway, so I did those, and then so that was interesting. And then at the same time, because I'd had my interest a bit piqued by this homeopathy, I started studying some homeopathy. And it's amazing how your view changes. There used to be a chap at the back called Dr. Robert Blomfield, and he used to sit in his tweed jacket with his pipe, which wasn't on, and his tweed trousers, and go, humph, vaccinations, poisonous, fluoride, poisonous. And I used to think, he's just bonkers. And I've spent a lot of time in my medical career and quite in my life actually realising that a lot of the people that I thought were bonkers actually weren't bonkers. They were just not mainstream.
Yeah.
Okay. Because of that, and because I carried on studying, I contacted Magda Taylor at The Informed Parent, which unfortunately it's been running for almost 30 years, and it's going to be the last issue in November this year. It's closing down because people don't seem to want paper so much anymore. They want podcasts.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of information from her. I got information from Dr. Blomfield. And because of my interest in it, I was asked by two mothers who were being taken to court by two absent fathers to force vaccination if I would be their expert witness.
Okay.
And initially, when they'd gone to court, they weren't related. The mothers weren't related, but the family court amalgamated them. And initially, the Legal Aid Board said, we're not paying for a witness because no witness will say it's okay not to vaccinate. And to give them their due, the judge said, no, they have to have a witness and you have to pay. So they found doctors. So they found people in the UK who weren't doctors, and the Legal Aid Board said, no, they have to be doctors. So they found doctors.
That must be very difficult.
Yeah. So they found doctors in America and Australia, and they said, no, they have to be UK registered. So then they found me. Now, I was bringing up and supporting two children on my own at that time, and I certainly didn't need to be doing this particular thing in addition. But I realised that if I didn't do it, and I don't mean if I didn't be their advocate, because as an expert, you're not an advocate. You are working for the court, and you're putting information there for the court to see so they can make a decision. But I realised if there wasn't somebody putting some information before the court that would otherwise not be seen by them, no one else would stand for them. Yeah. And I'm also Irish, and we have this idea of
about
the underdog. So I agreed to do that, and I went into it in good faith, like I go into everything. I mean, why would I not? I just saw it as a big challenge and a lot of work. So I looked at the reports by the two other expert witnesses, because once you have a minor or someone who is not capable of giving consent, you then have a whole extra guardian, the guardian ad litem, and you have a whole extra legal team. So the fathers had lawyer, barrister, legal team. CAFCAS, which is the guardian ad litem, the one who's the guardian of the underage person, they had a lawyer and a barrister, and then the mothers had the same thing. So I looked at these two expert reports, and basically they weren't very long, and they said the diseases all kill you, the vaccines are all safe and effective, they should have all the vaccines. And one of the experts even wanted one of the little girls to have a vaccine that at that time wasn't even given to someone in that age group. But anyway, and there were no references. So I thought, so how am I going to get the judge to realise that there is an issue here? I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll tell them a story. Now, a story doesn't necessarily mean it's not true. It's just that we respond to stories. So I wrote the story of each disease. So what happens if you get it? How likely it is to have clinical symptoms as opposed to not clinical symptoms. In mumps, only 20% actually get hamster cheeks. Most people have nothing. You just know they've had it because if you check their blood, they've got antibodies. So things like that. How you treat it if you get it, and what happened since before the vaccine came in, after the vaccine came in, what the manufacturers say are the adverse reactions, and how likely a child in a place where they have the basic necessities of health, which is clean water, adequate food, ventilated housing, fresh air, sunshine, someone to love and look after you, how likely they would be not to, if they had it, because there's nothing wrong with having some of these illnesses, they're developmental milestones, they're detoxes, but how likely they would be to have a bad outcome. And so I did that for each of them. I gave references for everything. There was no internet in those days, or certainly I wasn't on the internet. We're talking about 2001 to 2. I think there was internet, but I was a bit of a Luddite. I didn't get on the internet for a while.
No.
And I was a member of the British Medical Association, so I'd have to ask them for the references I wanted, and then when I read things, I'd look at the reference of what the paper I was looking at. So the paper would say one thing, and I'd think, well, yeah, but where did they get that from? And there's a reference, so then I'd get that reference. And I had a fax machine, and they used to fax all these things through to me, and it was hours and weeks of work. So I did this magnum opus, and I brought it in, and then we went to court, and basically they started off trying to destruct everything I'd said, and the judge got a bit annoyed because they said, if you don't agree with everything she said, you should have written another report. So then we were sent off to do more reports. And in all these things, you always find that the other side has sometimes years to produce the information, and they do it at the last minute. And if you're answering it, you have one of them. So I had 3 weeks before the new hearing, and one of them sent it to me I got it at 10 o'clock the night before I was supposed to be in Winchester the next morning from London. You know, I mean, that's what they do. And it's not just what they do. I mean, even with the General Medical Council, they do the same thing. They really crush you. Anyway, despite all of that, I went back there. The judge decided he didn't really like what I said as much as what the other people were saying. And there were, I do a whole talk actually about this. It's my special free present to people who follow me, which is called David and Goliath, Me Against the GMC. And it's my free lecture that I do this year. It's on the 22nd of December. And I normally do it through Eventbrite, but they decided to censor it this year and take it down. So I'm in the middle of looking for a new... it's free.
It's online?
It's online, yeah, online. It's on the 22nd of December.
You have to let us know when you decide and we'll share it. Yeah.
But I'm going to book people myself because it's free anyway, so there's no money transactions. I can just give them
people.
I can just give them the Zoom link. Yes, but I'm moving to another platform because it's been the same for several years, and suddenly they decided to say it's disinformation.
In a way, they're under pressure, aren't they? It's so difficult.
But this is now when everybody was censoring everybody,
and now it's a lot more open. Even Meta have become a lot more open. And now Eventbrite
are doing it anyway, so it must be good.
Yeah,
has to be a good lecture if Eventbrite are censoring it. So that's all in there. So anyway, they decided in the end that what I said was junk science. No, actually they didn't. They decided that the judge found for the fathers. The mothers appealed, and the appeal judges found that I decided that what I said was junk science. The actual judge in the actual case said that he talked about my sometimes disarming honesty. And I don't know why honesty would be disarming, because, like, what would you want to be apart from
honest?
Yeah.
But the whole thing with legalities, it's not to do with truth. It's to do with you try and destroy the person ad hominem rather than ad rem, the thing that they're saying. Because if you could make the witness sound unreliable, then everything else they say can be discounted. So that's what they do. Anyway, they said junk science, and these are people who'd never heard me speak. And then the GMC decided to accuse me of serious professional misconduct. And so it was interesting in the original papers they wrote me, because they wrote the complainant as newspaper clipping. And then that started this whole long thing, and we're all indemnified, which is not the same as insured, because they can decide whether to cover you or not. But I was indemnified with the medical defence union, and they thought I was fairly, a bit batty, obviously, saying things like that about vaccination. But there was never any limit on my practicing. I carried on practicing as a GP all the way through this thing. And then eventually they saw the medical report from the GMC's witness, who was a Dr. David Ellerman, who was then a consultant at Great Ormond Street. And in all the time they said that they'd been defending doctors, they'd never seen report by one doctor about a colleague that was so critical. And as he was so very eminent and I was so very uneminent, because I was just a GP. Not that it's just a GP. There's only 2 senior doctors in the health service. One is a hospital consultant and the other one is a GP.
Yeah.
But anyway, but I was very uneminent compared to being a Great Ormond Street consultant. So they said that I'd never win in front of the panel. They accused me of failing to be independent, objective and unbiased, letting my strongly held views about the subject of immunisation overrule my duties to the court, and the litigants to give a balanced view, and that I selectively quoted. Well, quotes are selective, otherwise they're not quotes and so on.
Yeah.
And actually my actual end summation was not that they should be vaccinated or not vaccinated. I'd shown that there were 2 sides, but I said in the end, if 2 parents are separated and they can't agree, then the one with day-to-day care should make the decision, whichever it is, because they're the people who are going to have to manage the outcome.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't think that would be too controversial, but it was. And so when they saw that, they said, you just have to agree to all these charges. We've done a deal. You'll be able to keep your registration. Well, I don't know if that would have worked out, but I can tell you that this was 3 years now into my life, and it destroys your life and your family, this constant pressure. And then I had a 3-week hearing up in Manchester. Now, the GMC then was based in London. I was living in London. I was home educating and supporting my children. And yet they made me go for 3 weeks to Manchester. Now, if I had taken out the wrong kidney and someone had died, they'd probably have done it in about, 3 days. Or if I'd done something to my patient who was anaesthetised, they could have figured that out in 5 days. But no, just to say that the person with care should make decisions, it was 3 weeks in Manchester. So I went to Manchester, and I can't tell you how many hours it took writing the reply to what the Dr. David Ellerman, the GMC witness, had said. It was just hours. You're trying to look after your children, had to stay up all night. I had help from people as well who would help me with finding references and stuff. Some people in Australia and New Zealand and whatever. But it was really, really tiring. But in the end, I went there, and after 3 weeks, and I still almost have to pinch myself sometimes, the panel found I hadn't failed to be independent, objective and unbiased, that everything I said was based on peer-reviewed science. I had made mistakes, but in the context of several 8 or 9 reports, myself, the 2 other witnesses, and the GMC witness, and my expert witness, 5 witnesses, hundreds of technical medical reports. I had made fewer mistakes than anyone else, and everything I said, as I said, was based on refereed medical journals. So in the end, what they did, instead of destroying me, and nobody knew who I was. I didn't have a podcast. I wasn't on the internet. I was a really small person, but dissent has to be squashed like this because it's dangerous in their eyes. So I ended up being found to be basically the only doctor in the country whose opinion, which is your report on vaccination, hadn't failed to be independent and unbiased in a 3-week UK statutory tribunal. So they launched me, really, because then I started talking about it and doing lectures and whatever. So this really annoyed them.
Yeah,
I bet.
And it wasn't a case of they didn't find me guilty of being not independent and whatever. They were sure, that means beyond reasonable doubt, they were sure that I hadn't failed to be independent. So it wasn't like they couldn't prove the negative. They positively said. And so they really didn't like that. And my report that I submitted is now available on my website, called Vaccinatable Diseases and Their Vaccines. And it's adjusted to include the errors I'd made. And one of the errors was not putting in the conclusions of studies.
Okay.
Because the science in the studies in the method and the results, because if the method is good, then the results are good. But if the method's no good, then the results are no good. But irrespective of both, often what you find in the results is not reflected in the conclusion. That's just hearsay. So now I've included all the conclusions, which sometimes look a bit weird when you see what the other things was, what they actually found. Because there's no proper, good, open, well-organised trials into vaccination, although there's this new one that's just come out in America with vaccinated against unvaccinated.
Yeah, my mum sent me that this
which
morning,
I haven't
funny
looked,
enough.
which I haven't looked through properly yet.
Western Guy shared it, I think.
And there is a lot of information there, but you have to be like a detective and you have to pick it through. And it's got to the point now, I don't care what anybody says, until I can find the actual, because people will quote and quote. It's like those Chinese whispers. You have to get the original study and get the original figures.
Yeah.
It's often quite hard. And then you can see what it really is. So I got very good at reading papers. And I do a lecture called Vaccination, the Science, where I teach parents so they can do that themselves. Because a lot of the time we have this thing about, I have this gut feeling, but then there's science. And you just have to, and I'm not a doctor. That's the thing. I dislike that the most. You're not a doctor, thank goodness.
Yeah.
You may still have the power of independent analysis. And if you think that all those doctors read those papers that those parents read before they make their decisions, they don't. They just read the guidelines from the government and repeat it verbatim, and they don't individualise. So don't tell me you're just a parent, or nobody's just a parent. And don't say I'm not a doctor, because that's a positive point. And so they know how to read things and access information themselves, because they really need to do that. So, but that was all fine. But people kept complaining about me, not patients, but doctors. Doctors complained about me. So it got to the point I was practicing as a locum, because that gave me more independence. I could work in different surgeries in London. And often I'd do a surgery for 5 years on a Wednesday afternoon, because they like me, because I'm a good doctor. But it meant that I could just see my patients, do my paperwork and go, and not have all these endless meetings and all these things that don't contribute to patient care. And so I was carrying on doing that, but the doctors would keep complaining. So it got to the point, by now I'd qualified as a homeopath, I'd qualified as a specialist homeopath, I'd done much more wide reading, and I was using this in my general practice. So one of the things I really liked about doing general practice was, in the GMC's mind, I was saying to everybody, don't have any vaccines. I wasn't. I was saying things like, well, the reason you got flu, you think of what was leading up to it, the flu's actually a detox. Rather than fighting it, taking lots of tablets, what you should do now is have a proper rest, open the window, drink lots of fluids, stop eating, take a lot of vitamin C, relax, detox, and then you'll sail through the winter. And also in terms of your long-term health, when you get rid of when you do a detox, when you get rid of toxins, then it doesn't accumulate to cause fibrous change, so you'll keep yourself healthier, and how you treat children. So I really like the honour of being able to explain to people that they weren't just having flu or a cold or something because of some bad luck, or they touched something on the keypad at the bank teller thing, that it's actually, your body's really intelligent, and if you just work with it. No, if you drink sewage and you're on the edge of starvation and you're an orphan or you live in a refugee camp, you are going to succumb to these things, because you'll try to do what the healthy person's doing, but you won't have the resources to do it. But generally work with your body, have faith that your body is amazingly formed, and all you have to do is work with it and not against it. So I like being able to give that look. And some people, they come along, their child would have had 6 courses of antibiotics, and I'd explain about, don't give the paracetamol and the ibuprofen, but they'll have a fever. Yeah, but the guidelines actually say only give it for pain relief, don't give it to stop febrile convulsions, because it doesn't. The proper guidelines, the nice guidelines, that's what they say, which everybody slavishly follows, things like vaccines, statin targets, blood pressure targets, and nobody slavishly follows the one that says don't give paracetamol and ibuprofen except for distress.
Wow.
And that
because
causes...
automatically, I know growing up as with kids, but you automatically think as soon as a child has a fever, you give them Calpol.
Yes.
Don't you?
And you always
to
are
suppress
scared.
the fever. There is a fear.
Because you're scared of the febrile convulsions.
Yeah.
The nice guidelines say do not give antipyretics, which are paracetamol and ibuprofen, to stop febrile convulsions, because they don't.
I didn't know
I've seen people threatened in A&E departments with calling the security people or social services if they don't give their child paracetamol, and then when they leave, because they've gone in because their child had a first febrile convulsion and that's in the guidelines, and then they said, no, they're fine, they're responding okay, or they're breastfeeding or whatever, they don't need it. Then they agree. This one particular woman, she's from Eastern Europe, she couldn't come in with her husband because it was COVID, so she just agreed. But on the discharge summary, which nobody writes, you just put in the, myocardial infarction, stroke, and a load of blurb comes out. So that blurb was febrile convulsion. in the discharge letter to the GP, it says, do not give paracetamol and ibuprofen for febrile convulsions to stop febrile convulsions, because they don't. And this is in the A&E of the hospital. Well, this wasn't in the A&E. This is the secretary or the computer thing in a hospital where they'd threatened her with security guards and social services if she didn't agree. This is what's happening in medicine. People are not thinking; they have just disengaged their brain, and they don't follow those guidelines. Anyway, so that's what it was. And anyway, so I kept on doing what I was doing, and then I think things were tightening up and tightening up. So my story used to end there. That was my story. I won. But then I think things were tightening up in 2019. I think they knew COVID was coming, and they were getting rid of all dissent. They sent out newspaper reporters to be fake patients, and they sent people around to lectures and so on and so forth. No. And then they accused me of serious professional misconduct again, because I'd said things like that having mumps is a good idea because mumps with the hamster cheeks reduces girls' risk of ovarian cancer. Wow. Which it does. Okay. And also that in the best of all possible worlds, girls and boys would get mumps, because for the girls it reduces their ovarian cancer risk, and because with boys there's a very low risk of becoming sterile if both of your testicles get inflamed, but it's much more likely to happen over the age of puberty, which is when you've got proper testicles. So it's much better to have it when you're 4 or 5 or 6 or something. And that girls should get rubella. I said in an ideal world, but anyway, that was the Telegraph and the Times. The Times sent round the reporter with the to the lectures, and they said I was putting pregnant women at risk because I said that pregnant women are sacred. Since thalidomide, we don't give them anything. We don't even want to give them paracetamol. Yeah, because they were asking about the pertussis shot, which of course isn't a pertussis shot. It's a pertussis, diphtheria, and tetanus shot, and in some cases also polio shot. And they just say, "Oh, we're going to give you the whooping cough vaccination," and they don't say about the other ones. Wow. You know, that's mad, yeah. So anyway, and there's no studies on whether it's okay to do that to a woman every 2 years. And there are studies now which show what any person with half a brain would realise is that if you anyway vaccinate the mother and she makes antibodies and they cross the placenta to the baby, when you're 2 months old as a baby and you have the vaccines, they're not going to work so well, because a lot of the antigens, the antibody generators in the vaccine, are going to get soaked up by your mother's antibodies. So it's going to make the vaccines work less well. But let's not worry about that. But they don't expect that to be a problem. It's very interesting when you read the proceedings from the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. They'll say we don't expect that to be a problem. Me, if I write the word "and," I need a reference. But they say they don't expect. And of course the studies have shown that is indeed the case, but they don't expect that to be a problem. Anyway, so in the end, then they came back at me again, and to cut a long story short, in the end I boycotted it because it was such a kangaroo court. They even accused me of dishonesty by saying I was the only doctor in the country whose opinion on vaccination hadn't...
But that's surely because of fear as well. Surely a lot of doctors are scared as well because they know that everyone... Yeah. Were you ever scared, Jane?
Scared of what? Scared of... Physically scared of being shot?
Yeah, both.
Or, yeah.
Yeah, well, somebody did write after I won that other case. They sent me a friend.
Okay.
They said, don't stand too near the edge of the platform.
Well, no, but you have seen there's people
are very
passionate
out, and opinionated when it comes.
Especially when they think they're right.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's interesting what you said about people have this idea that if you don't vaccinate that you're...
Killing.
Yeah, that you're really irresponsible.
And also
that
you're
you're
going to give
dangerous.
it to everybody else.
Yeah.
And put them at risk.
Whereas actually, if you really think about it, anyone that I know that has ever questioned whether vaccines, they look into both sides, they're more informed than just blindly agreeing, because you're doing it based on a more nuanced perspective.
Yes, well, certainly I've been talking to people about vaccination, and they've made their... So I don't tell people to vaccinate or not vaccinate. They say to me, tell me what to do, Brian. And I say, no, you have to make your own decision that's based on you, your beliefs, both of the parents, your social situation, your family values. That's what you have to make the decision based on. And some people have come along to my lectures and said, well, I've listened to everything you've said, and I think you've got some valid points. I'm going to vaccinate my children with everything that's available, but at least I feel I've had a full, rounded picture.
Yeah.
And so if anything, heaven forbid, happens, I won't be saying, oh, I never realised that something like this might happen.
Yeah.
And it must be said, I don't talk about adverse reactions.
Okay.
Because there's no point. Because I can say black and they can say white.
Yeah.
I talk about what happens with diseases, how you manage diseases, because once you realise that So if you've got a choice between my child's going to die or I'll have this vaccine that might have some adverse reactions, you're always going to choose the vaccine, aren't you?
Yeah.
But if you suddenly realise that everybody didn't stop dying before the vaccines came in, that often they don't stop you getting the disease, that's a very different thing in your balance.
Yeah.
To now I might need to start looking at the adverse reactions. And when you open up the package insert, so if anybody wants to get the package insert of a vaccine, which you should all have before you have a vaccine, but often if you get it at all, you get it afterwards to take home with you.
Yeah.
You put EMC drug into your search engine, and EMC is the Electronic Medicines Compendium.
Right.
And then you put in something like tetanus or diphtheria or meningo, and it will give you all the vaccines that contain those.
Right.
And then you'll have a choice of the summary of product characteristics, which is SMPC, or the pill, which is the patient information leaflet. And you can read those all the way through. You can read what's in it. You can read what the extra ingredients are. You can read what the contraindications are, the indications. And although when the manufacturers write adverse reactions in, they say, we've got no information whether these are causal, these are just things that are reported. You can see what they are. And they have them 1 in 10, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000. It's a well-known fact that's supported by a lot of scientific literature that all adverse drug reactions, not just vaccines, are underreported by between 10 and 100 times. But even if you just take it as 1 in 700 of serious reactions. So if you think of when's the last time anybody here died of like diphtheria, or tetanus in this country, who's a child, we have 700,000 children born each year. So if it's a 1 in 100, it's going to affect 7 of those, and they'll have 3 shots. So that'll be 21. So 21 children might have a really, 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 really serious reaction for something that is not problematic.
As I've started approaching my 40s, I've noticed a few things shifting. My metabolism slowed down, my skin and hair need more support, and that morning energy I used to have in my 30s just isn't the same.
And the more I've learned about it, the more I've realised it's not just about anti-aging. It's about supporting your body's natural processes every day so you actually feel your best long term.
Exactly. That's what led me to V14, and it's become my daily longevity ritual. It's basically 2 products in one. You get your full daily stack of essential vitamins and minerals for energy and focus, plus 14 science-backed longevity nutrients like NMN, resveratrol, quercetin and fisetin to support healthy aging from the inside out.
It's such an easy addition, especially when I need something quick in the morning. I just mix it into my morning smoothie. It tastes great, it's all natural, and every batch is third-party tested so you know it's clean and pure.
I actually just love drinking it in water too. It tastes great, and honestly, I've really noticed a difference. Steady energy, better focus, and also I've noticed my recovery from the gym is better too.
I agree with that, and because longevity isn't just about looking younger, it's about feeling stronger and performing better every day.
And the good news is you can try V14 with 20% off just for Raise listeners.
Just head to v14.com and use the code RAISE at checkout.
It's the one daily habit your future self will thank you for. But for some people, they would say, but that's because of the vaccine, wouldn't they? They would say that this has now,
well, in terms
the situation has become
because
better.
they're riding on the back of herd immunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it doesn't work with tetanus because tetanus is not an infection.
Okay.
So why are they not all dying? Heaven forbid. But
This
then,
is not my view, by the way.
No,
I'm just saying the
you have
arguments
to.
that I am.
Yeah, you have to. But tetanus is not a communicable disease.
Okay.
It's a toxin-mediated disease from having a toxin stuck in toxin occurring in the wound.
So for people who would say that the dip in these diseases came at the same time as the rise in the vaccines, what would you say?
You have to look further back and see what happened with the disease beforehand. Don't look at these things that start in the 40s.
Okay.
Go back to 1900 and see the precipitous decline. So with some of the graphs in the Green Book, they're true, and they're looking at incidence. They're true. But at that scale, if you put the whole graph in back to 1900, it would go up to the next story.
Wow, okay.
Of the house, because they cut off that bit. It's one of the ways you lie with graphs.
Right, okay.
So you cut off the bit beforehand so you can't see it. And then someone was saying, oh yes, well, it's true the deaths started going down, but the cases didn't go down. This is measles. Well, what's wrong with having measles? Like, measles is a childhood disease.
Mm-hmm.
So in this country where currently we think chickenpoxes are nothing, that's how people used to think about measles. It's also a big important developmental step. And if you have properly managed measles, which they don't do in America, they stuff them up with the paracetamol, which is Tylenol. They start giving them antibiotics. They admit them to hospital.
Wow.
Now, when you have measles, the disease, or measles, the vaccine, it reduces one type of your immunity called cell-mediated. So the last place you need to be if you've got measles is in hospital.
Yeah.
And why are they sending all these children to hospital? Don't they know how to nurse measles? I mean, in France, they had a big outbreak in 2013. They had a death rate from measles that we haven't seen since during the war in the 40s.
Right.
And they said a third of cases of measles were admitted to hospital, and most of the people who died were older, not
Okay.
children. Anyway, a third of cases were admitted to hospital. You always have to think about these figures, okay?
Yeah.
A third of cases admitted to hospital. A third of those had complications. Now, a complication is not the normal part of the disease. A normal part of a disease is always externalizing. So it's fever, loss of appetite, maybe a rash, maybe diarrhea, maybe vomiting, maybe mucus. That's what the body's trying to do.
Okay.
All the complications are invasive when you block that happening.
Okay.
If it invades your bladder, you get cystitis, your kidneys, nephritis, your liver, hepatitis, your lungs, pneumonia, your ears, ear infection, or your brain, meningitis, or if it's your bloodstream, septicemia.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not part of the normal disease any more than getting run over is part of crossing the road.
Yeah.
It does happen, but you look right and left. You don't let 3-year-olds cross on their own, and you still cross the road.
Mhm.
Okay, so these are not part of the normal course of the disease. And so when you actually have a well-managed case of measles, there's so many studies showing that you have decreased asthma. Do you know how many people die in the UK of asthma or are chronically ill? Asthma, eczema, and there was a big over 10-year Japanese study which showed that if you had measles, preferably measles and mumps,
Mm-hmm.
you had a much lower incidence of death from, not lower incidence of death because you don't have so many premature deaths from heart disease and stroke. So there's an awful lot of benefits from having a well-managed illness. So I wouldn't want to have something that stopped people getting measles. And once you've had the real measles, then you don't get measles anymore.
Yeah.
Giving a shot
It's
with
like
measles.
with chickenpox, surely.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the shot. No, I'm talking about measles.
Okay,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
but it's similar
Yeah,
as in
same
once
with
you've had
chickenpox.
chickenpox.
Yeah. But if you give the measles-containing vaccine when you're 12 to 15 months,
Mm-hmm.
then you get it in primary school. So to stop that, they did a preschool primary one, pre-primary school one. So they're all getting it at university. And there's lots of American universities that won't let you in without 3.
Really?
Wow.
Yes. And they don't care if you give them all on the same day.
Wow.
I mean, how safe is that? There's a saying in the New Testament where it says, was the Sabbath made for man or man for the Sabbath? And there comes a point with the vaccines, I think, was the vaccine made for the child or was the child made for the vaccine? It's like, we don't care. So long as you get it in you, we don't care what it does, just so long as we get it in you.
Insane,
Like
isn't it?
paracetamol.
Yeah.
You're all told to take paracetamol
Mm-hmm.
at the time, just before the vaccines, and then several times that day. Well, the paracetamol stops the reaction that the body's making, which is what they don't like, is they want you to give paracetamol so the child doesn't get a high fever or be ill, because then you'll think, oh, I didn't like that vaccine, I won't bring them for the next one.
Yeah.
So in
right.
order to stop that happening, you want to dope the child up to reduce the reaction to the vaccine.
Right.
And the reaction to the vaccine, which includes fever, is part of how you make the antibodies.
Yeah, of course.
So when they give the paracetamol, they make the antibody reaction less. So you already have vaccines that don't work very well. Now you're going to make them work less well. But the main thing is that you have them.
Are there any vaccines that you do think are more necessary than others?
Well, the one vaccine that a lot of people who didn't used to vaccinate against
Mm-hmm.
that used to want to have is tetanus.
Okay.
Now the smallest tetanus vaccine you can get is tetanus, diphtheria and polio. And it's only that small for people over the age of 7. And the reason it's only for people over the age of 7 is because the diphtheria component only has 2 international units of diphtheria toxin in it, whereas the one you get below the age of 7, like when you're 2, 3 and 4 months or preschool, has got 30.
What?
More, 15 times more. Okay. I mean, there is a bit of an anomaly with vaccines that a 70 or 120 kilo man gets the same
Shot.
shot as a small
It's
person.
an infant.
So the fact is, so that's a bit of an anomaly, but you can only get it as a 3 in 1. In terms of tetanus, whether you vaccinate or whether you don't, I have a lecture about holistic first aid, and it's really important, whether you vaccinate or whether you don't. What's the most important thing in terms of stopping tetanus is wound toilet, which is cleaning the wound. Most wounds are not tetanus prone, but the ones that are, you need to be careful with them and you need to use hydrogen peroxide on them.
Right.
And you need to stick them under a tap so it's cold, so you keep on bleeding. and squeezing it so the blood comes out. Blood is oxygen.
Okay.
The dirt comes out, and then you use hydrogen peroxide, which floods it with oxygen.
Right.
Because tetanus is everywhere. It's not just in farms and places with machinery. It's everywhere. It's in spore form, highly resistant to heat and drying.
Right.
It's in the dust. It's in the road. It's in your garden. It's in the sterile compost from the garden centre. But you could have a big cut on your knee pouring out with blood and rub a load of soil in it. I'm not recommending it.
No, yeah.
Full of tetanus spores. But you wouldn't get tetanus the disease, because in order for the disease to occur, you have to produce the toxin. And to produce the toxin, you have to have no air. It has to be anaerobic. And that's why the classic one is the rusty nail. Because the nail goes in deep where there's no oxygen.
Yeah.
And the rust is supposed to be the dirt with the tetanus spores.
Okay.
So that and third-degree burns. That's not red with blisters. That's barbecued flesh,
Right.
It's just burnt. So you have no blood vessels, so no blood, no oxygen.
And no oxygen, yeah.
And the other one is crush injuries, when the building falls on you, like on September the 11th, because it crushes your blood vessels, so you've got no oxygen. So those are the ones. So it's really important, and that's why hydrogen peroxide is the thing that I really recommend. It's the same as water. Water's H2O. Hydrogen peroxide is H2O2. It's got that extra oxygen. It's desperate to release it, and it fizzes away. It also stops tetanus toxin attaching to tissues.
Okay.
So whether you vaccinate, you don't, because it's very rare to get tetanus. But even vaccinated people can get tetanus. If tetanus was so common and so inevitable, nobody would have reached the 20th century, never mind the 21st. So in terms of tetanus, I give information to people so they can decide what they want. There are single vaccine clinics, and I think that it's a real shame that people go to single vaccine clinics and pay all that money.
Yeah.
Because many of the vaccines are not single anyway. When there is a 3-in-1 that they have available at the GP surgery in the fridge. And the only thing is that diphtheria content is not so high.
Okay.
But you didn't want it for that anyway. You'd want a single tetanus one, but you can't get one. But it's free and you pay your taxes. You should be able to get it.
Okay.
So
what do you think about the current childhood vaccination programme?
Well, I don't know why they give anybody hepatitis B.
Okay.
I mean, why would you get hepatitis B? You get it from dirty needles, sex, drugs, tattoos. I mean, if you think your child is going to be at risk of those behaviours, there's an awful lot more things in your child's life that you have to worry about than whether or not they get hepatitis B.
Yeah.
And it's got a very high dose of aluminium.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know why that shouldn't be there at all. And the thing is that even when they're, say,
what is the role of aluminium within a...
Well, I was going to say, even if you get to be 15 or 16 and you are going to be doing sex, drugs and rock and roll, the shots you had will have worn out by then. You'll need another one. So there's just no point. And the reason we have it is because the World Health Organization wants everybody vaccinated against hepatitis B. And our Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation resisted for years, saying it's not endemic, it's not cost effective here. The decisions have to be cost effective now. But in the end, the manufacturers said, we'll lower the price. So the price was right. But I submit that the price being right is not a good reason to give somebody something that they don't need. And if you don't need it, then all you have is the adverse reactions, which you can look at in the package insert.
Yeah.
Aluminium's there as a helper. You don't have it in live vaccines, so it's not in rotavirus or measles, mumps, rubella or chickenpox. If you just got someone and you injected some of the antigens, so antigens are antibody generators. Everything's an antigen. So, whatever you swallow, if it was something the body thought was a problem, it would make antibodies against it. But the body's trained to know that some things are you, some things are not you, and some things don't matter. Some people react a bit to things like pollen that they don't need to, but that's a problem, but they shouldn't be doing that. So even if you injected something like intramuscularly or subcutaneously into something like tetanus toxin or diphtheria toxin, in some cases you would make antibodies, but in some cases you wouldn't, because the body's terribly economic. It uses up a lot of energy for the body to either have a fever or do something like make an antibody response. So it might just think, well, we'll just get rid of it, because we have a pretty efficient systems for getting rid of things. So in order to make sure that you get an antibody response, you use adjuvants. Now, adjuvants is from the Latin adjuvare, to help. So aluminium salts are always toxic. And this is not a conspiracy theory.
No.
They are always toxic because they've got no use in the body. So the body always makes an immune response to it.
Right.
So while it's making an immune response to the aluminium, then the things you want it to make a response to, like hepatitis B, diphtheria, tetanus, polio, whooping cough, it starts making an antibody response to those.
Right.
So it's a bit like, it's part of the vehicle, and those are the things that are like in being carried along by the vehicle, so it makes a response to all of those. Well, that's in theory what it's supposed to do. But of course, we like to compartmentalise things, and things aren't that simple. So we want it to make antibodies to the things we want it to make antibodies to, but there's a lot of other things in the vaccine which you can find out when you go to EMC drug, it's easier than remembering the website. You will see there's lots of other things. So of course it's going to make antibodies to all of those as well. There's no little fairy inside that says, oh, aluminium stimulate an immune response, but only make it for the things we want it to make it to. So there's lots of other things in there, like different antibiotics and different bits of animal protein and so on and so forth. So there's two reasons I think a lot of people are more allergic today. One is that we hyperstimulate the immune system with the vaccines. And the reason we do that is because we don't make them and license them based on stopping you getting a disease. We license them based on antibody levels. Okay. So it's really important in this billion-dollar business that you get loads of antibodies. So you hyperstimulate the immune system to make sure you get the license. But of course, when you hyperstimulate anything, who's going to say it's just going to be stimulated against what you want? Other things are going to be there as well. Yeah. So that is a big problem. Plus, you're hyperstimulating against all these other bits in the vaccine as well. Yeah. So it's a bit of a, it's a bit like, well, I don't know, it's a bit of a time bomb. You just put these things in. And in terms of aluminium, they say tested. Well, before 1938 in America, they brought in a Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act. Everything that was already licensed without any testing, because they just used to want to know that it was what it was. So if you said it was an aluminium adjuvant, it didn't have to have lead in it. Right. So it had to be aluminium. And so everything that was already licensed without any tests was automatically moved over.
Wow, so it passed through almost without...
Almost, not almost. Okay. No, it just passed through without any safety tests. Then there have been newer aluminium adjuvants and other adjuvants. None of them have safety tests because they're only ever tested in combination with the vaccine. So they didn't go, we've got this new aluminium adjuvant, let's test that and see what it does to rats and mice and all those other poor creatures. They say, oh no, you have it in your hepatitis B or your Gardasil, have it in one of those, and then we'll test the Gardasil. So they're never individually tested. That's one of the things about these robust tests. There aren't any robust tests.
So I know you mentioned about the chickenpox vaccine that's been rolling out. Can you tell us what your thoughts are on that?
Oh, gosh, goodness. I wrote a whole article for the Informed Parent about that. And as I said, the Informed Parent's about to close. And I realised that there's an awful lot of information in all those articles since 1996. I think I've been writing them. I'm going to start reading them on a podcast. It's one of my things to do. I'm going to read all my art. I'm just going to read them.
Yeah, perfect.
And I did one about chickenpox. Now, these things have to be cost effective. So when they were looking at the impact of chickenpox, like nobody's dying of chickenpox. If somebody dies of chickenpox, we're talking about massive medical mismanagement. And the biggest one is messing up the fevers. Yeah. And so they couldn't find any because nobody goes to the doctor for chickenpox. No. I mean, most people don't.
It feels really...
Yeah, they don't.
Bonkers,
so what they had to do,
really
they had to do was
extreme.
They couldn't get any information from GPs. They couldn't get any information from people visiting GPs or the practice nurses or anybody, a bit like the rotavirus. So in order to get the information to show that it was going to be cost effective to have a chickenpox vaccine, they had to go to playgroups and nurseries. Like, not anybody who'd gone to see a doctor, and interview the parents of children who'd had chickenpox to find out how many days off work they had. To work out,
so it's more about inconvenience for the workforce.
To work out that we waste £24 million a year on people taking time off to look after their child with chickenpox. That's why it's being introduced. Yeah.
So it's not even like a health issue; it's a societal
No, but
work
the other
issue.
day, Keir Starmer was talking about how dangerous it was to not have it.
Chickenpox.
Yeah. About the chickenpox because of the guy I was talking about earlier. Who?
Yeah. Well, I've got an elderly friend. Well, I don't know, she's not that old now compared to me. She's 77, and she's has no children. She doesn't know anything to do with vaccines. Doesn't really watch podcasts. She watches the BBC and she reads the Daily Mail, whatever. And she was saying, and we walk our dogs on Saturdays. And she was saying to me, it's really weird. She said they've got all these things about chickenpox now. They keep saying chickenpox is really dangerous. Yeah. And she noticed it herself. We don't talk about vaccines. Okay. So it's not part of our...
There's certain people you don't,
Well, it's not that. It's just not relevant. I don't spend I'm not a vaccine. All I talk about is vaccines. That's a very small part of my life. And so she said, it's really weird. They keep saying it's really dangerous. And apparently they've got this vaccine for it now. And I said, well, that's what it is. It's the playbook. Problem, reaction, solution. You tell them it's a problem.
Yeah.
they all react and go, oh my goodness, my child's going to die of chickenpox. I mean, go to America, they think it kills you anyway.
Yeah.
And then we have the solution. We have a vaccine. They've done it for every vaccine that's come in. And of course, when you have the chickenpox vaccine, the thing about chickenpox is that when you have ordinary chickenpox, especially if you don't manage it so well, I mean, even sometimes, but I mean, the main thing is you want to get things out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't get it all out, in the case of chickenpox and cold sores, it goes and lodges in one part of your, where your nerves are, in
Right.
chickenpox in your spine. So if it's up here, you can get you get shingles. You can get it on your face if it's lodged up in one that's in your head, an occipital one, or in a spinal one. You get this. You get the
I
bands.
had that. Yeah.
And so it sits there and it waits until your immune system's a bit low.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be because you're old, or it could be because you're stressed and worn out, or because with cold sores it's bright sunshine, ice, all sorts of things like icy weather. So it will come out. So normally it happens. They're not normally as young as you. They're normally more.
Yeah, I know that it was. I was. Yeah.
They're normally older people as your immune system's going down, and crucially because you're not spending so much time with children who've got chickenpox. Because every time you walk past a person with chickenpox or incubating chickenpox in the bus, the supermarket, wherever, you boost your chickenpox antibodies, which keeps it under control.
Yeah.
Okay.
So usually you're generally older. But now, since America, they've had it in America for years. 15-year-olds are getting shingles.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's dire. It's like with measles. Some of these things are not just in our generation; they are generational. So normally, if you've had real measles, your antibodies that you give your baby will protect them for 12 to 15 months, and then after that's fine. You have measles.
Yeah.
When you've had a vaccine, it only lasts for 6 months. So before COVID, which made everybody forget everything, before COVID, they were doing a big thing about measles. All these children in Europe are dying of measles. These children were below the age of 15 months. Why? Because their mothers were vaccinated. So even if you stop vaccinating against chickenpox now, you still have to have another generation. So I've had all these things myself.
Yeah.
So I've got real immunity.
Yeah.
But all the vaccinated mothers, they don't, and they didn't give it to their children.
Okay.
So we'd have to wash it out for a few generations.
A quick pause to tell you about one of our favourite partners, Exhale Coffee.
You know what I realised the other day? For years, I blamed caffeine for making me anxious, but it turns out it wasn't the caffeine at all. It was the toxins in the coffee itself. Coffee's actually one of the most pesticide-sprayed crops in the world, and it can be full of mould and mycotoxins, which explains the jittery, wired but tired feeling after your morning cup.
That makes so much sense. I switched to Excel recently, and honestly, I can tell the difference straight away. It's organic, independently lab tested, and completely free from mold, mycotoxins, pesticides, all the stuff you literally don't want to start your day with.
It's also the first coffee in the UK that's actually designed with your health in mind, packed with antioxidants and polyphenols so you can get clean, calm energy instead of that crash.
Exactly. I feel focused, not frantic, like it gives you energy that actually feels good in your body.
If you love coffee but you don't love how it sometimes makes you feel, this could genuinely change everything.
And the best bit, Excel are giving away free trial bags right now, and they even cover the shipping.
Just head to exhalecoffee.com/raise to claim yours. But it's crazy, isn't it? Even within measles, I saw something online and it showed how measles used to be portrayed. And it was like, oh, you look a bit flushed on your cheek.
Have you seen the American TV program?
and then
it's such fun. And let's all sit down and play this game. And it's only measles, not something nasty.
No, and then there was the comparison to a measles outbreak in America. And they were like, the school's shutting down. Oh, my gosh. And
that poor baby, that poor little girl who died in Texas.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Oh, there's a poor little girl who died in Texas from, she was Amish.
Right.
She had such lovely, trusting parents, and they just the medical people just mismanaged her so badly. I mean, they should never have taken her to the hospital because that's what really knocked her off. But the thing is, you can't just go, oh, I'm gonna have the disease. You have to know how to manage it, and it's not anything scientific.
No.
You open the window, you give them loads of fluids.
Yeah.
You don't feed them unless they're starving.
Okay.
We give them more fluids and more fluids and more fluids, and then you make sure you don't give paracetamol and ibuprofen.
Okay.
And people think, well, why is that such a big deal? Well, you have a fever.
Mm-hmm.
The body's economic. It only makes a fever, which uses up more energy, which means more food at some point and more metabolism, more protein, whatever. It only decides to make the temperature go up when it needs to make everything go faster, because normally it's just at the right level for everyday life.
Yeah.
When the temperature rises, then the liver detoxifies faster, the kidneys filter faster, the white cells gobble things up faster. When you give paracetamol or ibuprofen, you bring the temperature down, so that's upsetting that process that you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Plus now, instead of detoxifying your toxins, it has to start detoxifying the paracetamol and the ibuprofen.
Right, okay.
As well as that, when you do detox, you produce things that aren't very nice sometimes, called free oxide radicals. They're also called reactive oxygen species. They keep changing names. So if you can imagine a 5-year-old in your sitting room with a blowtorch, that's what they're like. So they can injure the body. But the body, being very clever and intelligently designed, has things to stop that. There's vitamin C, which we don't make, but there's glutathione, which we do make.
Yeah.
What's one of the things used in breaking down paracetamol? Glutathione. So you're using up your glutathione. But don't think ibuprofen's better. I mean, ibuprofen should be banned. It should be never given to anybody who's got a fever. No child should ever have it. If you've got any type of viral-associated disease, it increases your likelihood of bacterial superinfection. It's really dangerous stuff. And in France, even in COVID, they found that people with no health risks, like they weren't obese or diabetic or anything, the ones who had ibuprofen had worse outcomes. And in fact, in France, I think since 2019, they banned the use of ibuprofen for all prescriptions by French healthcare staff for any type of what they call viral respiratory infection. And even with paracetamol, because it gives worse outcomes. And even for paracetamol, their maximum dose per day is lower than our one. Our maximum dose is 4 grams, which is 2 tablets 4 times a day.
Yeah.
And their maximum dose is 3 grams. So get rid of your ibuprofen in many plastic bags so it doesn't leak into the groundwater.
Okay.
And only use paracetamol, but use it according to the NICE guidelines for distress. Now, there's many other things you can do for distress, but if you don't want to go into all of that, if you just used it for distress, you would give so much less and you'd have such healthier children and better outcomes.
Yeah.
And there's people, you know, who actually wake up a sleeping child to give them their next dose of paracetamol. Yeah. And interestingly, I don't know how much more time we got left. Interestingly, in Cuba, when I was in Cuba in 2019, I was amazed at how full of joie de vivre and verve and élan and everything that the children were and the young adults. I mean, they've been embargoed for ages.
Yeah.
And they're just so vital looking. And I thought, oh, maybe it's because they don't have things like MMR vaccines. Maybe they're all embargoed because, you know, the US has been embargoing Cuba for years. So when I got back home and I got a better internet, I looked it up and it turns out that no, they don't embargo the vaccines. Not only that, they get almost exactly the same schedule as America. And there's a 99% uptake because it's a communist country and you don't get to decide.
Okay.
What they don't have is paracetamol. You can't buy paracetamol across the counter. It's an import. You can't buy it. It has to be prescription only. The doctors don't prescribe it. You don't have it before, during and after having had a vaccination.
But it's so innocent here.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. And they have an autism rate that's 290 times lower than America. And there's a biochemist in the Western United States who's done all the biochemical reasons for why this might be the case. And they're having all the MMRs, but they don't have the autism rate. And it's not because the Cuban doctors are not very good. Cuban doctors are excellent. They're exported all around the world and they fly out every time there's a disaster. Everybody wants Cuban doctors. And there's a lot of health tourism to America, from America, people going to have their operations done by Cubans because they're so good. So it's not improper diagnosis. So we concentrate a lot on things like MMR or measles vaccine, when, as we know, it's probably also to do with aluminium. It's probably to do with the fact that the vaccines used to be started at 3, 5 and 10 months. Now we've had more vaccines and they're 2, 3 and 4 months. So if you're a susceptible one, you have so much less time to recover. Then you used to get a measles vaccine, but now you're getting an MMR vaccine and all these things. Yeah. And we give everybody paracetamol all the time. I mean...
For everything.
For everything.
Yeah.
And so if you take it there are many other ways you can relieve distress. But if you just gave it for a headache, but this obsession where you've got to get the fever down, that's just why we end up with all this invasive disease and all these problems. And one of the things about COVID was that I don't personally have any experience of hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin. Because I got all of my patients, and I got a lot of extra patients. Well, not so much extra patients, but they're passing the information on to their grandfathers and grandmothers and great aunts and great uncles and everybody. I made sure they had a really good dose of vitamin C, not just taking it, but knowing that they had a level of 120 to 150 nanomoles per litre. We have different ones too. America.
Which
America.
vitamins
I
D would you
literally was just
recommend?
about to
Sorry,
ask.
vitamin D. Vitamin D.
Vitamin D.
Oh,
Sorry,
I thought you said
vitamin C.
C.
Sorry.
Sorry, maybe I did, but I meant D. Yeah,
Okay.
so our optimal range is 120 to
vitamin D,
150
yeah.
nanomoles per litre from the blood test. In America, it's 40 to 60 nanograms per litre. And because people say, I'm taking vitamin D. I said, yeah, but what's the level you've got? Because you can take it and it cannot be
And which
absorbed.
vitamin D do you recommend?
I recommend, unless you have got a really good level, a spray under your tongue.
Okay.
Because you have to rely on a good integrity of your gut to absorb fat-soluble vitamins.
Right.
And a lot of people have got the wrong bugs, they've got bits of inflammation, whereas if you spray it under your tongue, it goes straight into your bloodstream.
And is there a particular brand?
And so, well, I was going to say, so
Sorry.
so although some of these people got COVID,
Mhm.
and some of them got very ill, nobody went to hospital and nobody died. And that's entirely because they had really good levels of vitamin D.
Okay.
And they also, many of them didn't go to hospital because that's what they did. They made everybody scared. They showed all those pictures of people dropping down in China, and the people get a cough. Oh, sorry. They get a cough and they go, oh no, I'm going to die. And they'd rush to hospital. They get, and then they get ventilated, which was the wrong treatment. And then if they didn't die from that, they'd get remdesivir, which would knock off their kidneys. And it's just terrible. So anyway, so there's various ones. There's one called Better You, and there's one called Core, Core, like apple core.
Okay.
And ideally you get it from food.
Yeah.
And you can also get beautiful cod liver oil. But I learnt my own lesson myself before COVID, which is that I got this ache in my arm. And I thought, I probably must have banged something. So I keep banging this microphone. I thought, this ache in my arm. It's the other arm, but never mind. And I thought, well, I'll just forget about it. So about 2 years later, because I'm not a person, I always think I'm healthy, it'll be fine. About 2 years later, I thought, well, what if I got bone cancer? And I thought, no, why do you have bone cancer? You know, like people who get cancer, not everybody, but, you know, I shout at my children enough. I'm not repressed. I won't get cancer.
Yeah.
Everybody. So I thought, well, it can't be vitamin D deficiency because I eat about 3 eggs a day.
Yeah.
And I had super rarefied North Atlantic cod liver oil that I was taking. Yeah. And I eat butter like it's going out of fashion. I mean, I only have bread so you can put the butter on it.
Same here. That's what we always say.
And I thought, well, get my level tested. So the range in this country is 50 to 250. And if you actually manage to get your GP to test it and you're 50, they go, oh, you're fine. And it's not. You're just on the other side of rickets. Anyway, it was 47. Oh, and I walk over an hour or 2 hours a day with my dog outside. So there's all that butter, cod liver oil, sunlight, whatever. 47. And they sent me a free packet of Better You vitamin D spray. And there is a lab in the Midlands, which is an NHS lab that does private vitamin D tests on the side. And they cost about 37 quid. Your doctor should do it, but they're told in the NICE guidelines not to unless there are symptoms. Like
I got mine privately tested and I was really deficient. I ended up getting an injection because I was really low. And it really surprised me because, again...
it's the biggest cause of illness. So basically, whatever people come with, whether it's their hair's falling out, they're depressed, they've got awful periods, they've got colon problems, or they've got, their foot hurts or whatever it is. Until I know that their vitamin D level is 120 to 150 nanomoles per litre, I don't know how many of those symptoms are being caused by vitamin D deficiency.
Wow.
It is just
It's that serious.
It's that serious. Well, basically, people think about teeth and bones, but it's a major, major, major part of your immune system. And it's anti-cancer and anti-infection. Well, this thing about infection, they're detoxes. But basically, you don't get so toxic if you've got vitamin D in sufficient quantities.
Okay.
Because then all your cells and your excretion and your taking in and your metabolizing mechanisms all work better.
Interesting.
So it's really important. But if you are taking vitamin C and you get it to the right level, you need to take K2 as well. Yeah. Because otherwise...
Vitamin D with the K2.
So people just think about teeth and bones, but it's much more than that. But it is also about teeth and bones and calcium.
Okay.
So when you take the vitamin D, you will extract more calcium from your diet. And you want it in your teeth and bones, not your arteries, not your cardiac arteries.
That's why you need the K2.
And the K2 will do that. But also if it's even in your arteries, it will start shifting it.
Okay, because a lot of supplements now do actually have
a
vitamin
D3,
with K2, don't they? Which is good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so people we would spend so much less in the NHS. Everybody says we're underfunded, we don't have enough money. No, you waste your money on loads of people at Elephant Castle, whole places all typing things of people buying this and buying that and internal markets, and you don't get the vitamin D levels right.
So, okay, that's really interesting.
Take your vitamin D, guys.
Yeah. As we're heading into, I can hear the rain outside.
Yes.
So I think we need to head on to quick fire.
Yeah. There's so many other things I feel like we could talk to you for hours, but we are running out of time, unfortunately. So we've got some quick fire questions for you, Jayne. So what's your one piece of advice to parents who are feeling confused and overwhelmed about vaccines?
You need to know how to manage fevers.
Okay.
Because if you know why people get ill, why people have symptoms, then, and you realise it's not just some a malign god like Thor sitting on a cloud with a thunderbolt thinking I'll take every sixth child, and you realise it's just actually part of the child doing what it needs to do so that with any luck it's going to live till 120 years in good health and in full possession of the faculties, the whole question becomes completely different. Sort of in a way, sort of even if there were 100% safe, 100% effective vaccines, why would you want to stop your body doing the natural processes that it does?
Yeah.
And that's why I do online lectures on Tuesday evenings. You can see them at my website. I have a lecture called Fever is Your Friend. And it's so important. I repeat it every 4 to 6 weeks. So I have a lot of other lectures, but that one I keep repeating because whether you're worried about vaccinations or you're worried about mumps or how to treat things or whatever, if you know how to manage the fever, then your life is simple.
Yeah. Okay.
And the only reason, so we worry so much about fever in children. We don't get fevers ourselves very often. And that's because we're so old and crumbly. And when I say old and crumbly, I mean over the age of 6. That we don't empty ourselves out. We start having fibrotic change. And that's why we're going to die, because we can't empty ourselves out. And this very thing that we're so scared about with children is the sign that they are so vital and so healthy and so intolerant of rubbish. And then we thwart them.
I love that kind of take.
Yeah.
So based on that, what's your favourite natural remedy for kids when they're under the weather?
Love.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, I love that.
That's one of the things, when they say, 24 million with parents taking time off work. One of the most loving things you do for your children is nursing them when they're not well.
Yeah.
That's mothering. But, mothering doesn't count. Looking after children doesn't count unless you're being paid to look after somebody else's children. And that's one of the big problems with what feminism has done. It's said that if you're a man, like you run a company, that matters. But just being a drudgy woman at home looking after your children, that's the new generation. More important than anything you do in any factory or House of Parliament or anything like that, looking after children.
Yeah.
And so, yes, love. And then open the window, lots of fluids.
Yes.
And that's without anything else. I mean, naturopaths just do that. Lots of clean water. I use homeopathically. There's a couple of remedies like arnica or pulsatilla, not to lower the temperature, but to make them feel better so they'll drink and sleep. Sleep's the great healer.
So they're able to rest.
I find they help. So they rest. Yes, that's it. And love. Yeah.
I love that. What's one question that every parent should ask their GP before agreeing to a vaccine?
Could I have the package insert, please?
What vaccine do you get asked about the most?
Mostly, well, it depends on what age you are. For children, it's mostly vaccines.
Okay, just in general.
In general. For other ones, it's things like travel vaccines.
Yes, and I actually wanted to touch on that, but we haven't got time today.
So I do consultations where I see people. I don't do medical practice. I don't practice as a doctor. I practice as a naturopath and a homeopath. And I do consultations for that. But I say to people, look, I've got a travel medicine booklet, ebook, download it and read it.
Okay.
I won't see you until you read it. Because you need to take some of these things on and read them properly. It's not very big, but you need to read it. And I said, in 99.99% of cases, you don't need to have a consultation with me because all the answers are in the book.
Okay. Right. And what's one wellness practice that you swear by personally? One wellness practice that you swear by personally.
It's very important what you put in your body, and it's very important that you do, things like have health and exercise. But the biggest thing is what you think. Because bodies are really just the consolidation of our emotions. So it's really important that we have a positive outlook, not just, just, everything's going to be fine, but expecting things to go well and trusting yourself that the body's good, the body's okay. And even when people look around and they go, look, somebody's just got shot and this thing's happening and they want to make digital thinger. If you give in to the fear makes you produce adrenaline, steroids. In the short term, they're to help you. In the long term, you get adrenal fatigue and then nothing works so well. You run out your steroids. You have all these bad effects from it. So you need some kind of faith that the body is intelligently made, the universe is intelligently made. And once you start being afraid, you produce all these low-level vibrations which just eat you up. So you need to be happy, jolly, get outside, take your shoes off and walk on the grass so you earth yourself, sing, have an animal, have your children. But, people who have cats and dogs, particularly cats cats absorb negative energy. That's why they shouldn't be kept inside, because when it's the full moon, they go out and discharge it.
Okay.
I didn't know
because they're
that.
absorbing.
Yeah, they like
from...
it.
Okay.
They absorb it, but they have to discharge it.
Okay.
Yeah, outside. So it's really bad if you have an indoor cat and they absorb all that stuff and they can't do anything with it.
Okay.
And,
I hadn't heard that.
And animals are different to children. I mean, children are lovely and great and wonderful, but, you know, you are the nurturer of them.
Yeah.
They're not the nurturer of you.
Yeah.
Whereas your pet is the person that they're designed and evolved to do nothing really useful apart from make you less likely to die prematurely, because we're all going to die. Yes, and you don't have such a duty of care to them in terms of what you have to do with your children.
True.
So yes, so you have to have a positive outlook and be happy with what you've got, and think about the cup being half full, not half empty. If you just think about your grandparents and think, look what I've got in my fridge or my cupboards. I mean, your great grandparents would be amazed that you'd have all that just sitting on tap, having people delivering things to your door, whatever, you know. So be happy with what you've got, be happy with small things, and go out and look at the sun coming up sometimes, or the sun going down. That's more my type of one. And sing.
Okay, I love that. And then the last question is, which book has impacted your life the most?
Oh no, that's a very interesting question, because probably quite a lot of books.
If you could choose
one that you would maybe recommend.
Yeah. For what? For the vaccination issue? Or for
or
the health
just
issue?
what?
Well, there's a very good book by a 1930s naturopath called Herbert Shelton.
Okay.
And that's one of the things. So I really like Amazon. You know, I was looking after an uncle and an aunt with very bad Alzheimer's and double incontinence and everything, and all the way through COVID. And had it not been for Amazon bringing all the nappies and bleachers and wipes and everything else, I'd never have survived. So God bless Amazon. The other thing is that you can access books that would otherwise have been thrown in a skip. And I think but there's a book called The Hygienic Care of Children by Herbert Shelton.
Okay.
And nowadays everybody's a little bit more, you don't want to say too many nasty things. I mean, now if you say a tweet, you get put in prison, but you know, people don't say too much. But he's sort of like, I like reading him because he says, and these doctors are useless, and this treatment they do is just useless, and they do whatever, and this is what happened, and we did this, and we had better outcomes than these charlatans and whatever, you know, and quacks.
Yeah.
So I like it because he's iconoclastic, and his advice in the book is I probably wouldn't do quite so much of the fruit juice, but his advice is very good.
Okay.
Yes. Herbert Shelton, The Hygienic Care of Children. There is actually a free PDF that you can download.
Okay,
which
great.
I can send you a link to.
Yeah, we'll be able to link that then for
Thank
everybody.
you.
But also, I just want to thank you for your bravery and all your hard work that you've done over the years. It's really, really amazing. We're very grateful for your time.
Thank you.
And everything that you've done.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to your podcast, and I hope it helps empower a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.